Good morning, everybody. It's nice to put faces to names because I've seen names, but I haven't really seen faces. So today I kind of want to talk about aiming towards proficiency in a letter grading system, because I think we're all very familiar with having a letter-based grading system, and it's not exactly the most friendly towards proficiency, I would say. So this is kind of how I get a little bit of a workaround for it. So yeah, I'll just kind of get going, and hopefully you'll be able to see my slides. Can you see the one that I want right here? Okay. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background information about where I'm coming from. So I'm actually split between two buildings. The first building is what we call the middle school, and that's grades 6 through 7, where I teach exploring German. It's only 10 weeks long, because it's only a quarter, so we can't really get into a whole lot in the 10 weeks, unfortunately. And I only have that one class there. So after that, I go over to what we call the junior high, where I teach 8th and 9th graders together, and it is German 1 and German 2, which are both full year classes. We do use a letter-based grading system. We are kind of trying to shift our focus from, just grammar focused and, just the letter-based system, and trying to really encourage our students to move towards proficiency. And we're trying to adjust our teaching to make sure that we are fitting that. Before I was here, actually, I did my student teaching at Novi High School, which is, it's in Southeast Michigan. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I have been in Southeast Michigan, my whole life. And pretty much all of the systems that I've been in, whether it was my student teaching, my previous district, and this current district, it's all just been letter-based grading and just on a point system. So I'm going to kind of explain a little bit how I get around a little bit around that. So you can see my next slide. Okay, good. So how do I grade to reflect proficiency? It's really kind of boils down to two different things that I do. The first thing is my gradebook breakdown, which emphasizes language production with the goal of communication over grammar exercises and memorization, and I'll get a little bit more into that. And I also use proficiency-based rubrics, and these allow me to, quickly grade a language sample, like whether it's speaking or if it's writing, and it also allows me to provide valuable information to my students, and I guess quick grading is kind of the key, because I have 102 students right now. I think you can all relate to some degree that you want to be able to give quality feedback, but also do so quickly without spending hours and hours and hours working on, one language sample. Okay, so the way I have my gradebook broken down, it's actually consistent with the other German teacher in the district. She teaches at what we call our high school, which is grades 10 to 12. So we kind of have to have some kind of consistency between us, so that when my students are coming from 8th grade, 9th grade, and then they go and take German at the high school, they're already familiar with how their grade is going to be impacted. It's not necessarily the way that I would want my gradebook to be broken down. I think I would want to have less emphasis on the grammar and vocabulary, and maybe a little bit higher on the listening and the reading, because I would say that those are both equally as important as the speaking and the writing, because they are all, the 4 modes of communication. So basically, she has more experience, so I kind of do what she wants me to do. But yeah, so the current breakdown that I have, it's 25% speaking, 25% writing, 13% and 13% are both listening and reading. The grammar and vocabulary equal 14% altogether, and then the formative assessments are worth 10%, and I think I would even want to make that a little bit less, just to have it more focused on the proficiency base. Okay, so actually the other teachers in the district, so the Spanish department especially, I've been working with them. And we're actually doing a really cool curriculum study right now for German 1. So I think we're going to be shifting a little bit more towards this kind of breakdown in the grade book, with interpersonal, so speaking and writing, being worth 30% of the overall grade, presentational, being speaking and writing also 30%, and then the interpretive, the listening and the reading being 30%, so still more emphasis on the output than on the input as far as grading goes, and then formative assessments 10%, which is pretty much just completion grades, making sure that they're, you know, getting the practice in before they actually have to, you know, what do you call it, like present the language and demonstrate that they can do what they can do. And one key thing would be that not every mode of communication would be assessed every unit. So, you know, unit 1 might have an interpersonal speaking and then an interpretive listening. And then the next unit would have a presentational writing, for example. So it would kind of be getting a variety of the different modes of communication instead of having, you know, I have to assess, you know, reading, writing, listening, speaking every single unit, because that can sometimes get in the way of just doing the teaching and getting the practice in if they're feeling stressed about having to do each of these modes of communication. So how do I assess my students? There's really kind of 4 main ways that I do this. Daily warm-ups, they kind of range from responding to questions to describing photos. You know, sometimes it's practicing grammar, but it's more of like in a communicative kind of way, you know, where maybe they're correcting statements instead of, you know, saying, how do you conjugate, you know, this verb in the past tense? It's, okay, so this is in the past tense, but it's actually written incorrectly. What should that actually sound like? The proficiency-based rubrics, I already explained a little bit about that, and I'm going to show you the rubrics that I actually use, as well as some student samples. I'll probably have to explain why I would grade each student the way that I graded them. I don't know if I have any other German speakers in here, so I'll explain it, don't worry. So yeah, the proficiency-based rubrics, they are available for speaking and writing right now. I haven't quite thought of a way to do the listening and the reading quite yet, but those are the 2 categories right now that carry the most weight in my current grading system in the grade book. So I kind of wanted to make sure that I'm giving really good quality feedback for them. My in-class activities, those are kind of just, you know, the formative assessments, you know, figuring out where they're at. I actually started doing this thing with them. I call it Tischrede, which is table talk. And basically what it is I present a bunch of questions up on the board, you know, ranging from how's your day to what kind of things do you put in your luggage when you're traveling to wherever. And there's usually about 16 questions just presented on the board. And when they're doing this, they can reference these questions. I also do this thing with them called visual vocabulary, where they have their vocabulary list and they have to put some kind of visual representation of their vocabulary and label it so that they're making that connection of like, okay, I'm going to draw a picture of a car. That is das Auto. So they know das Auto when they look at the car, for example. So I allow them to use their visual vocabulary when they're doing the table talk so that they have something to refer back to, so that it kind of builds their confidence in using the language. And then I also really emphasize with them when they're asking these questions to use follow-up questions. So who, what, when, why, where. So if you ask, how are you? You could say, oh, I'm doing well. Then a follow-up question could be, well, why are you doing well? Oh, well, I just saw my friend today, you know, and they're just kind of pulling more information from each other. And usually when I do this, it's about 10 to 15 minutes that I just let them talk in groups of 3 to 4. And they've really liked it so far. They're feeling really good about it. And, you know, at the end, I make a big deal about it. Like, look at that. You just spoke for 10 minutes in German. Congratulations. And everybody claps and it's great. So yeah, they're actually really into it. They were very intimidated at first, but now they're like, they really, really like it. The reading and Listening comprehension, that usually requires the students to either fill in the blank or respond to open-ended questions in English, pretty much because assessments need to assess what they are saying they are going to assess. So when we're assessing the reading or the listening, I'm more concerned about what they understand rather than seeing that they can provide a response in the target language. I really just want to see, did you know what was being said? Are you able to figure out, you know, what the text was saying? I think I'm running out of the space off to the side. Okay, so here is a sample of one of my rubrics. This one in particular is for speaking, and I use this actually between my two buildings. It just says CJHS to make my junior high schoolers feel better that it's, you know, just for them, but I use them between the two. So I grade them based on pronunciation, and if you see number 4, the highest that they can get graded on that, it says pronunciation is clear and easily understood, and there's very few pronunciation errors, so it's not so much that they are reducing their accent, it's more, can you speak clearly? Am I able to hear the words that you're saying? The next one down is communication, and basically communication is clear and easily understood. I don't have to, you know, work too hard to figure out what they're trying to say. Grammar, it says there are very few grammatical errors, and errors do not interfere with the overall meaning, and that is really my big thing with that, is that the grammatical errors are not interfering with the meaning. You know, so I tell them, if you don't conjugate a verb correctly, or if you don't use the accusative case when you're supposed to, I still get what you're trying to say, so I'm probably just going to gloss over that and say, no, your grammar did not interfere with what you were saying. Whereas if they say something that is grammatically incorrect and it changes the meaning and makes it a little confusing, then I would put them maybe around a 3. Vocabulary, they're using a wide range of relevant vocabulary to the prompt. So they're not just, you know, using the same phrase over and over and over again, but they are including different information in their language sample. And then fluency, so just how well their language is flowing. So yeah, that's pretty much the rubric that I use for the speaking part, and really a lot of them do very, very well with this, and I've had really good feedback from them that they actually really like this because they're like, oh, I can actually do things in the language. So it really does build their confidence with using this. So yeah, this pretty much, it allows me to assign points based on how well a student is communicating. And it also shows them exactly where they need to improve. And if you look off to the side, like where, you know, in those boxes on the left, it gives me a little bit of room to write just a quick little, you know, not quite a full sentence, but maybe a little phrase to let them know what they could do to improve. So even if they get all 4s, I could say, hey, I noticed this, you know, with your vocabulary, you know, maybe you could do this next time to improve. So even though they're getting all 4s and it looks like, you know, oh, I did perfect, you know, well, there's also this one thing that you could do to improve and make it better. So really the goal of this is to, you know, to have them do well and not get docked points for each small mistake that is made. And I really enforce at the beginning of the year, you know, how many mistakes do we make in English throughout the day or in our first language, you know, and they usually think about it and they're like, probably a lot. And I'm like, okay, yeah, so how often do you really think about it when you make mistakes? You just kind of correct it and move on and pretend it never happened. So I say, why would we focus on those little mistakes that we make in our second language? Because it's our second language. Okay, so here is a student sample from German 1 from last year. And the prompt was that they had to describe a restaurant that they liked. You know, it could be made up, it could be one in Germany. And this one in particular, I would have given all 4s. Their communication was very clear. It was not hard for me to be able to follow along with it. For the grammar, there were some grammatical errors that would be typical at this point in German 1. So it says, ich und meine Freunde sprich über die Mädchen, wir mögen und die Schule. So the word order was a little bit weird and the conjugation wasn't quite there, but I know that he was trying to say, like, you know, my friends and me speak about the girls we like and school. So in that case, I would not have docked him for grammar because it did not interfere with what he was trying to say. Otherwise, the sentences are simple and level appropriate. The vocabulary, I think even as not German speakers, you can see there's a wide range of vocabulary. He's not just using the same words over and over again. And then I also do have organization because that is a part of the written language. And I don't really have that. I don't have a score of 4 on that. The highest they get is 2, because I don't necessarily think that their ability to organize written language is a true demonstration of their proficiency. But in this case, I would have given him the full credit for the organization because the paragraph flows in a logical order, and I think that demonstrates a level of proficiency because they're able to, you know, take one idea and connect it all the way through. I hope that makes sense. So here was another student sample, another written student sample, and I would have graded this one a little bit differently. For communication, I would have given her a 3, so some of this were a bit confusing and a little bit unclear as to what she was trying to say. That was communication, right? Grammar would have also been a 3. There are many grammatical errors, but only a few of them actually interfere with the overall meaning. So there were a couple that I was, let me see, I didn't have that written in my notes. Yeah, there were a couple grammatical errors that I was, yeah, like das Abendessen etwas dauern 1 Uhr. I kind of was like, that would literally be the dinner something to last an hour or a clock. So it didn't really, mean much to me. Vocabulary, I would have given her a 4, though. You can see she's not using the same vocabulary over and over again. And the organization, I would have given her the full credit on that because, again, she's starting in one area and she is explaining all the way through in a logical order. All right, so I guess what questions do you have? I hope I was clear.
Yeah, you were super clear. I was curious how do you convert the 4-point rubric to a score that you enter into your grade book?
So usually what I do, let me pull up my sample. I just add up all of the 4s, and it's the raw score.
It's the raw score, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have a question also similar to that, but because you have to give letter grades, I guess, for your class, how does this turn into, like, are the 4s like an A and the 3s are a B, or how?
Yeah,
that's for that.
Yeah, usually that's how it works out mathematically. And really it's hard for them, even if they, like, if they don't do too great on it, they're still, like, doing fairly okay as long as they're producing the language.
So you were saying that right now the breakdown you're using is not necessarily what you would want to be using,
right.
But your goal was to transition more to, like, the 3 modes: the interpersonal, the presentational, and interpretive. So just like logistics in your grade book, I'm trying to think, when you would set up categories and you would weight them at 30% each, right? So then when you enter an assignment, you would pick that category, you would just put in the raw score, and then the grade book does the rest.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I'm doing it right now. I do think there is going to be a shift because we're doing a curriculum study on German 1, and I think that would include the breakdown of the grade book because we're working very closely with the Spanish department on that.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping that that's what that turns into.
And I think like the field overall is trying to move more towards those like 3 modes of communication versus like the 4 separate skills. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I have more of a quick comment because we do the 30-30-30, except you know how you were mentioning that you don't do all 3 modes in a unit. Sometimes we have found that we're not able to assess all 3 modes in a grading period. So instead of having 30-30-30, we have, actually it's less than 30 for us, but we have 80%. And so 80% is proficiency assessments. And then if I'm only able to do 2 of them this grading period, then the next grading period I make sure I do like a different one. And that way you are not scrambling at the end of the grading period to try to get that one presentational assessment that you haven't done. So you still have that, but you have one big chunk. So just something to keep in mind as you move forward.
Yeah.
You know what would go really well with this too, with if you do the 3 modes, ending like each unit or each like marking period with an integrated performance assessment that had a task in each of those. That would like be perfect.
Yeah.
You're inspiring.
That would work very nicely with that for sure.